This is HBR News number 365. Okay, Predditor. NASCAR star murdered. Local man discovers female privilege, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. My name is Brian, and I'm joined by, as always, my austere patriarchs and our handmaiden, Hannah, Mike J, and Dr. Randomer. We have a great show lineup for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News show, we're going to be talking about Reddit mods that are policing the usage of the word groomer, or they've passed some rules regarding the use of the word groomer on Reddit. A man conducts an experiment where he applies to jobs as a man and then as a woman, and the results will probably not surprise you. A NASCAR star known as Bobby East is stabbed to death at a gas station, I believe in California. Ricky Martin, the old singer, living La Vida Loca, is facing accusations and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So for the patron-only show, I thought it could be interesting to check out this article. It is like, this is a hot button issue. Everyone's talking about abortion right now, and all of the social and legal fallout and what people are worried about. But thenation.com has written an article entitled, and I just have to read it because it sounds like, this thing that is really bad and that we should be treating with a tremendous amount of care is happening, and that's a good thing. So abortion involves killing, and that's okay. To be
you just wait for it. They're gonna ban the word killing from Reddit soon, but only when it applies to women or something.
Yeah, only when it applies to women. To be pro-choice is to be against forced life by Sophie Lewis. So I haven't read the article. I kind of want to see what angle she's gonna have on it. I think it is funny when they say things like, and this comes out of the media all the time, right? You say, oh, this issue here could become bad for these reasons, and then they say you're a conspiracy theorist, and then you say, but wait, I see all of here's all the evidence that shows that we're going in this direction and we're going down this slope or whatever, and then they say you're a bigot and you should shut up and silence this man because they're spreading lies. And then it always inevitably becomes, well, actually we are doing everything you say, but it's a good thing. So it's the same line of conversation every time. And I think that's where we are with this article. So Sophie Lewis, you are a pioneer. You're just letting us skip to the part that we want to actually, talk about. So we can get
and
to
you might
that.
want to have a conversation with vegans about how killing is apparently okay. Is that still woke? Is vegan still part of the woke movement? They can't really decide, can they?
Absolutely.
It's okay if you're killing bugs.
Yeah.
If you're killing bugs and eating them, fine. But if you're killing mammals or fish, that's about it. And whatever.
Yeah. Or you're eating unfertilized eggs. That is basically killing a life. And yes, they have actually argued that.
They'll actually harass the hell out of a vegan if they find out that person isn't woke. I know a few people who are vegan for non-political reasons, and that have been really harassed like hell by people who think they should be woke because veganism is owned by wokeness. It's disgusting, honestly.
Yeah. I'll just say that when I talk about vegans, I'm not referring to people who are simply making dietary choices about their life.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people who either advocate or inevitably want to force their lifestyle on everyone else. Those are the only vegans I ever take issue with. So, and those people do tend to be, the same kind of anti-human, anti-natalist, anti-men, types, because it all falls under the same series of umbrellas that revolve around the concept of oppressive class, which are basically people who eat meat, and the oppressed class, which are vegans. So, or at least political vegans.
It all comes down to authoritarianism. You can do what you like as long as it hurts anyone else. But if you force me to do what you want to do, then we're going to have a problem. And this is where it all becomes complicated with abortion, because in theory, that's killing something else, even if it's inside you. That's why this is such a hot topic.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's going to be our patron show topic. Reading through this article, which I'm sure is going to have a lot of nuance and a lot of like really well argued and well placed arguments that reflect why it's okay that abortion involves killing. And I'm sure I'm going to learn something from it. So if you want to be a part of that, either as a member of the audience or as a participant in the actual discussion around the article, please consider becoming a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, and you'll be able to watch additional content, and you'll be able to participate in all of the additional activities. There's game nights, there's movie nights, there are writers' workshops, there's like you can do wellness checks. There's tons going on in there because we're trying to build a community that cares about men and recognizes them as important. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we have been yeeted from the internet and you can't find us anywhere, always remember you can go to either honeybadgerradio.com or you can go to badgerfeed.com. And that's where our content lives. And it's probably a good idea to bookmark those, as well as honeybadgerbrigade.com, which is the main website. All of the streams and shows that we create, they get posted there as well. We just want to make sure that you'll always be able to access the content. So I think that about does it. I'm going to go ahead and get us into the stories. If you're on YouTube, I am going to try not to switch over to Rumble this time. So feel free to stick around. But if you're on Rumble, we really appreciate that as well. Or if you're on Twitch, Odyssey, I think it's Odyssey or DLive. We're on DLive, not Odyssey. DLive and Facebook. Although I think that I may not be streaming to Facebook right now because Facebook has banned me for a week. And they also told me I can't post in any of the pages that I run for like 50 days because I shared a video that I found on Facebook, which is really weird. So, whatever. If you don't find us on Facebook, it's my fault, is basically what I'm getting at. All right, so let's get into today's stories. So first thing we're going to talk about is Reddit and their banning of the word groomer, or at least that's what it seems. So here's Pink News. They're the only people that I know of that actually wrote an article on it. I saw the article, but I knew it was Pink News, so I knew I wasn't going to get an objective view on this. What's weird is they even got something, I guess they got something wrong that would have benefited them if they reported this more honestly. In a way, because it adds a little bit of nuance, however small. So Pink News writes, anti-LGBTQ plus groomer slur banned on Reddit in bid to tackle hate speech. Your move, Twitter, by Emily Chudy. And here's the more sort of specific, I guess, reference. This is something that Mike J sent through by Alejandro. This is a tweet, but it sort of like gives us the basic, back.
The tweet's there in the article, by the way. That's where I found it.
Yeah, so this basically gives it I guess what we need to know. So Reddit will now enforce their hate speech policy on content that utilizes the groomer libel. Content that equates LGBTQ people to groomers and pedophiles will violate the hate speech policy. Reddit is now more proactive than Twitter. Your move at Twitter safety. So this person is obviously in favor of the restrictions on Reddit, not wanting LGBTQ people to be essentially labeled or plastered with the groomer slur, as they would describe it. So here is the background. This isn't too long. So yesterday, PCM subreddit operators stickied an announcement in their subreddit announcing that they are finally being required directly by Reddit administration to enforce Reddit's site-wide Rule 1, which prohibits promotion of hatred, targeted harassment, and violent threats. The list tells us important facts about Reddit trust and safety policies Trust and Safety's policy about hate speech that targets LGBTQ people. The details of that will be in a comment. The implications for hate speech targeting LGBTQ people. We won't be reproducing the full list published by the PCM operators here. It is full of slurs for no reason other than to openly publish slurs. But the most important parts of those lists for our purposes are these. No portraying LGBT people as a whole as groomers or pedophiles. No portraying being transgender as a mental illness. No genocide denial. I don't know what that has to do with LGBTQ, but I think I do. Referring to being trans as a mental illness. Suicide statistics, for example, 40%. It's actually 41%, I think.
That's a fact. Why can't you... Oh, whatever.
Hate facts.
Yeah, equating a LGBT with pedophilia and using the word groomer to refer to LGBT.
Even when they're grooming.
Yes, even when they are in fact grooming. And that, I don't. So what they're saying is that they don't want people simply equating being LGBT with being a groomer. But so in
a vacuum would be fine.
Yes, in a vacuum, that would be fine if it was just because, we don't want to unfairly present people as something that they are not. But the problem is that this rule is going to be highly exploitable, so that even if you are directing the word groomer in a way that is accurate or you suspect is accurate, because you have some evidence, they can use that to get you penalized on Reddit with whatever the penalties are, because they can claim that you have broken the terms of service or the the non-hate speech agreement.
You can imagine sort of step by step how this went down in the offices of the Reddit admins. People are calling us groomers. What do we do? Well, surely we do what we always do. We do the Darvo thing. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. We respond with, "No, you're the groomers. You groom children into a heterosexual lifestyle." Well, no. Generally, children are born from heterosexual relations. I don't know why I'm saying generally. Children are always born from heterosexual relations, even if it's in a test tube. And so most children are raised by a man and a woman in a heterosexual relationship. And those parents do not encourage their children to be straight, certainly not before they hit puberty. We have to try something else. Well, all right, how about we claim grooming is a good thing, and that grooming is what we should be doing. Grooming is just transitive. So it worked with inflation. It didn't work with inflation. Everyone knows we're talking mountains of bullshit with regard to inflation, and we're definitely not going to get away with saying, "I'm a child groomer and I'm proud of it." I know you're a Redditor, but please try and touch the green grass of the real world for a second. No one's going to get this kind of grooming confused with the act of brushing a child's hair. They know what it means. They're not going to accept it, and it's not going to work. Well, what do we do then? We'll just ban people from saying it. Well, we can't just ban the word groomer. That's going to involve algorithms. No, we won't. We'll just use a massive network of admins to ban people from saying it specifically about LGBTQ people in the event of them grooming children into being the sex and gender they want them to be. We'll continue to refer to it as emotional social learning, and if anyone calls it grooming, we'll ban them for saying that. Okay, that works. Then we can still call dog groomers groomers, we can still call horse groomers groomers, and we can still call ordinary heterosexual parents child groomers. Exactly! Welcome to Reddit. And we can still call Muslim grooming gangs groomers? No, that is also banned. Welcome to Reddit. Where stigmatized words can only apply to straight, white, cis Christian men and their insipid enablers. Get with the program. Okay, groomer.
It's funny. The conservatives that are talking about this are talking about it like Reddit suddenly just now became woke. So for anybody who's listening to us that's conservative, let me give you a quick rundown. In 2010, I joined Reddit. There was a neat subreddit that I found there that I'd been looking for because of problems that my husband was going through with his ex-wife. And so I joined the men's rights subreddit. And then I ended up with some financial problems because of my husband's ex-wife that we couldn't afford internet for a couple of years. And so I was only able to get on at the library. And then one day I show up and there is no men's rights subreddit at all. Like there'd only been about 3,000 people on it, but Reddit was tiny back then in comparison to what it is now. And so I started looking around. I did a search for it. I discovered a discussion, an argument between feminists and the men's rights subreddit admins about whether or not it should be allowed to exist. Now, mind you, by that time, there were already 11 different feminist subreddits that excluded men or excluded conversation initiated by men or that was pro-male in any way. So the only place, and then the rest of Reddit was kind of anti-male as well, so the only place men could talk about men's issues was the men's rights subreddit. And they were trying to get rid of it. So I got involved in that argument, and I made a few very long posts about how sexist it is to say that women need 11 different spaces that are exclusively for conversation about women's issues from exclusively a feminist standpoint. Like they also excluded, say, traditionalist women, conservative women, any women who are non-feminist. And yet men could not have one space that was not controlled by feminist women for their discussion of their issues. And I'm hoping that was one of the things that helped bring the men's rights subreddit back. But from that day forward, it was under attack. And it was under attack so badly that they actually had to create a bot to document their posts because feminists would come in, make a post that sounded really victorious, like my ex-wife and I were at butting heads with each other over custody, and I finally, with diplomacy, got her to agree to a custody arrangement that suits us both, and now we're both happy and the kid's happy and everything's okay. And you'd have all these people make comments, yay, that's great, I'm glad you talked her down from her anger and all this other stuff. And then they come back and change it and say I raped and killed my ex-wife, or something along those lines. And then they'd report it, and the actual admins would come along and say you're harboring violence. Well, the post didn't say that when all those guys left that comment. So it wasn't really harboring violence. It was bait and switch. And in order to prove the bait and switch, they had to have a bot to archive the original posts. Well, Reddit eventually came along with the asterisk for edited posts. But the admins, ever since that incident, have been threatening to get rid of the men's rights subreddit. And the reason they've been threatening to get rid of the men's rights subreddit is specifically because the discussion in there did not take place from a feminist standpoint. The men in there were allowed to talk without having women control what they had to say. That's very woke. That is the epitome of wokeness. All of wokeness rides on top of anything men do having to be policed by women. It all rides on top of gynocentric attitudes. It all rides on top of feminism's patriarchy theory. So from that standpoint, when you look at this pink news, this is not about protecting gay men. We'll start there. They don't give a rat's ass about you if you're a man and you're gay. They will have no problem throwing you under the bus, even if you get obviously falsely accused of being a pedophile. The people that are promoting this at Reddit, they want to protect feminist women, lesbian women, huge overlap there, and trans women. They don't really care about you if you are a trans man.
And groomers. I mean
yeah,
because that's who this is going to protect, right?
But they'll protect those people, and it is mostly lesbians and trans women who are engaging in this behavior where they start imposing their lifestyle choices, their assessment and reaction to their own personal experiences and their politics on other people's children. And we all know, like, and I'm not counting bisexuals in this group for a reason. There is a massive prejudice against us too, especially female bisexuals from lesbians. I don't know if gay men treat male bisexuals the same way because I don't have any experience being male, but yeah, it's strictly going to be lesbian women, feminist women, and trans women who try to impose their politics, right? And in that group, they will also protect child molesters who happen to be in the LGBTQ spectrum. And we know that child molesters go across the board. There isn't a sexuality in existence that doesn't have a tiny minority of people in it that are warped and go after children for some reason instead of wanting to have relationships with people who can reciprocate on equal grounds. Just predators, right? But we're not allowed to talk about that in the LGBTQ movement. It's only supposed to be straight people, right? And we're not allowed to talk about what to do about it because we're not allowed to acknowledge that it exists. And we're not allowed to acknowledge that it leads to violence within the movement either. And this is just going to exacerbate that. And frankly, I think that if you end up victimized as a result of this, you can't talk about your experiences and somebody's kid gets hurt, they should be able to sue the social media outlet because they have suppressed discussion about this issue. I think this is a good reason to get rid of Section 230. Like, now they are actively engaging in political activism to protect child molesters and people who are engaging in conversion therapy. If what I described about imposing their politics and such doesn't sound to you like conversion therapy, go take another look. Because that is exactly what it is. They are shaming students for being cis, straight individuals. They are shaming them for not being part of an LGBTQ Borg. If that's what you're about, then your sexuality isn't about love. It's about politics. And it's very sad.
By the way, bisexual men and indeed bisexual teenage males are just about as stigmatized as homosexual males or homosexual teenage males for the crime of loving men. For the same reason that bisexual women and bisexual teenage females are stigmatized by lesbians for the crime of loving men. It's loving men that's not allowed. And if you think that's stigmatized, wait until you see what happens when you advocate for men's rights. Because that's the kind of man love that's absolutely verboten. You can suck all the dicks you like, but if you advocate for men's rights, you're out, regardless of your gender or your sexuality or your sexual preferences. It's giving the slightest fuck about men. That's what gets you ostracized from the general community.
Yep, very much so.
So, go ahead, Mike. Yeah, go ahead.
Something interesting, a little pattern I noticed that finally got broken here. Don't know if you guys remember back in the yesteryear when they were trying really hard, whether it was actually like a concerted, legitimate effort or a troll campaign, but they were really pushing to get a P added on to the LGBTQ.
Yeah.
For pedophile and community, for again, organic or not, saw right through it and they're like, no, we're not fucking doing that. Fuck off with that. And they tried again recently. Well, not recently, but a couple years back. They tried. Remember Maps?
Mhm.
Yeah, maps. Yeah, sure.
And they're like, yeah, we're just part of the community. We're part of that big old rainbow. Yeah, babe, we're just blending right. No. Fuck off, guys. They finally got their in.
Mm-hmm.
They finally got their in, and the community or the people that support the community like, no, you leave these groomers. I mean, you leave these LGBTQ alone.
Pretty much.
The Overton window moves at ludicrous speed.
Well, maps is like a lot of people like legitimately use that term.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not even like a joke anymore.
No.
People like actually
No
take
one
it
should-
on.
No one should ever use that term. And here's why. When you use the term map, you are legitimizing the idea that all that makes them different from somebody who has an attraction to an adult is that they prefer the physical body type of a child, and that they're not actually creating harm, that they're not interested in dominating and predatorily exploiting a child, right? But I have had arguments over and over again, and without exception, every single person that has approached me with this, and I get approached with it a lot because I do talk about pedophilia online because I'm a recovered victim. Every single one of them says the same thing when confronted with the same question. I've asked them, so what if you met somebody who was chronologically and intellectually and psychologically an adult, someone who was in their 20s, but who had not physically developed through adolescence, or who had the genetic disorder that causes you to never go through puberty? And would you be able to have a relationship with that person because they got your preferred body type? Oh no, I would know the difference. Like, that's immediately their response. No, it wouldn't be the same. Well, why not? Because they wouldn't have the innocence of a child. So when they say the innocence of a child, what they are actually talking about is the incompetence to consent. Children can't even competently make their own decisions as to what to eat for lunch. If you leave a child alone for like a week in a house with food, they will eat dessert, they will not eat real food. If you leave a child alone, they will not take care of themselves. They will not go to bed when they need to go to bed. They will not get up when they need to get up. They will not lock the doors. They won't remember to not let strangers in. They believe that a fat man in a red suit comes down the chimney at night and drops presents under a tree, magically getting around the entire world in one night. And it doesn't sound suspect to them until they're like 6 or 7 years old, right? So what they're really talking about is being able to exploit the vulnerability of a child's gullibility and a child's inability to set and enforce and communicate their own boundaries, right? Because they haven't fully developed that yet. So they are not minor attracted people. They are predators who want to exploit the lack of capabilities that minors have to engage on equal footing in a relationship. And it's not something that happens organically. It's a learned behavior. So it's not a sexuality. It's not the same as being gay. There's not a pedophile gene. There's not a helplessness toward being a pedophile. And treating the mental disorder pedophilia, which is in the diagnostic statistic manual, even though they will tell you it's not, is not conversion therapy. It is helping somebody redevelop their ability to engage in functional relationships with adults who they are afraid of. So don't use the word map. Don't use it seriously. Don't give them that. They're not minor attracted people. They are predators.
And like I said in a recent episode, we probably shouldn't even be calling them pedophiles, because pedophiles is also a euphemism for, it just means people who love children. All kinds of people love teachers love children, parents love children. We're talking about people who fuck or want to fuck children. So we need an accurately descriptive word for these people. I'm happy with kitty fucker. Don't make me tap the sign. It's not rocket science. They just want to diddle kids.
So I guess the only thing left to add to this is it looks like Reddit found a workaround for not being able to use the word groomer, and it's called Predditor, but it has the word Reddit in it, so it's Preddit with 2 D's, and that seems to be like the workaround. I think it's hilarious, and I think that they should push that and just wait and see how long it is before they ban that as well. I also think it is not a good look to ban the word groomer and then pretend as though it's always being used in reference to LGBT people, and that LGBTQ people would want it banned because it makes them look bad. And maybe the G Mafia deserves it because they probably do have predators among them, because why wouldn't there be? But when it comes to regular LGBT people, I don't think they want to be associated with this, and that is the amount of charity that I will give. So, I just
want to point out again. I was going to say, just want to point out again, the only reason Reddit is doing this is because the predators in question are mostly women or female identifying people.
Go ahead, Mike.
That's
what were you going to say?
I mean, just on the surface of it, no, many look like they patently don't. I mean, we had the what was that one group pop up recently, Gays Against Groomers?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Because that's the thing that has to happen. Like it's sort of like there needs to be voices from within that population to speak out, because it doesn't look good if you're basically saying, well, look at all these, people grooming kids, and they also happen to be like queer or some form of queer. And it also seems to be that if I call it out, like a bunch of other, G Mafia, people start speaking against me, but there are no gays coming out on my side here. And that doesn't look good. So yes, there should be people of all, groups and walks of life saying something, because this is a no-brainer. There's nothing, it should not be political, but it is. But it shouldn't be. And that's where we are now. And also, I saw someone mention that there is a P in the full acronym. The P doesn't stand for pedophile, though. It stands for pansexual. So, which is basically like the thing that's going to ultimately destroy being gay, lesbian, or bi, because pan is basically the best thing to be. And so they're going to use it as a weapon. They're going to eat each other at some point. It's going to be used as a weapon against. It's going to be used as a weapon to get people in line. And that also applies to the trans thing, which I've already talked about, because being trans means that you want to switch from one gender to the other gender. And if there is no such thing as gender, or that there's infinite genders, then being trans doesn't make sense, because it's transphobic, because you're operating within the binary. So
yeah, even within the concept that technically some trans people don't even sort of belong in the LGBT. Think about it. Like, if you're a man, and you say, oh, well, I'm going to become a woman, but I'm going to date exclusively women, I'm going to be a trans lesbian, and that was always allowed.
Yeah,
you could always be a man saying he's a woman dating other women. That's technically being straight with a lot of extra steps.
Yeah,
well, the thing is that they've destroyed trans status with the idea that you don't actually have to be trans to be trans. Because being trans used to be a duct tape and bale wire cure for gender dysphoria, which was it was in a diagnostic statistical manual. It was actually understood to be a mental health condition, and it is profoundly disturbing for somebody. Just like any body dysmorphic disorder, where you there's one called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where you feel like your body is disproportionate in size to the space that you're in and the room that you're in, and it's an inaccurate perception of the size and shape of your body. And it's very discombobulating and upsetting when it happens. Happens to me when I have a really high fever, and I only know that because I had one once that went up to 107, and they thought I was going to die, and I didn't. But like, if you could lump in anorexia nervosa with this, where it's caused specifically by people thinking that they're fat when they're not. There are other causes for that, but a lot of disorders where somebody perceives their body differently than it is, or they're disturbed by the accurate representation of their body. And that's a real thing. And now people who experience that real thing, which is a real disturbing condition within the self, that the individual needs help dealing with, and needs support in overcoming or reconciling, so that they don't become suicidal. Now you're not allowed to talk about that, and now you're not allowed to recognize the fact that for decades now, we've used a surgery to create a facsimile of opposite sex identity for individuals who experience that, when it is profound enough that they cannot live with it, the difference between their perception or their sense of their self and what their body actually looks like. And now we've thrown all people who are actually trans under the bus, so that Tumblerinas can play, who like to play act at other mental illnesses. They like to play act at dissociation. At dissociation, like they talk about having headmates when they don't, and so on. They're going to play act at being trans now because they think it makes them cool and special and unique and interesting. This trend will eventually die because everybody will be a part of it. It will no longer be unique and interesting and special, and therefore nobody will want to do it. And we'll go back to a situation where we have to recognize that this does happen to some people in real life, and it is based on the difference between somebody's perception of themselves and what they actually look like to everybody else. And maybe someday we'll be able to come up with a treatment that, instead of transitioning their body to something it's not, is able to help their brain reconcile their perception with reality. And that would actually be better. I think it would reduce the suicide rate against transgender people. But until then, we're going to be stuck putting up with these Tumblerinas exploiting your disability, and it is a disabling condition for some people, for shits and giggles, basically. And I would think that people who experience real gender dysphoria and who have been through the profoundly deep depression and sense of discombobulation and so on that goes along with that would be horribly insulted by that behavior, and not accept it, and certainly not go along with it, certainly not condone it, and certainly not encourage it. So the individuals in the school system that are engaging in this grooming, that are trying to use conversion therapy to make kindergartners question their identity, to wrongly and falsely impose that horrible experience on kids, I would think that anybody who's actually experienced gender dysphoria would never tolerate that and never want to be associated with it.
I think what we're seeing is that happening in real time, that this coming breakup of the LGBTQ whereas they were kind of formed, they all grouped together, they all huddled around each other, because it was like, okay, well, we're all these oppressed minorities, we got to come together because we share this one thing in common. And now that one thing has kind of largely been dealt with, I think a lot of these separate groups within the Rainbow Coalition are looking at each other and going, we actually don't really share much in common at all.
Yeah.
And every time we try to, speak out, one group tries to say something about something else is wrong. It's like, well, no. We have to stand in solidarity, or else we're all going to be fractured again. And I think enough people are finally going, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing.
We got to move on. So, because we've spent like 45 minutes on this one, but let us know what you guys think about this story, the banning of the word groomer on Reddit. I don't really use Reddit. I don't know how to use Reddit very well. So, but it is a place where a lot of people come together to discuss things. And, it's in my opinion, is a bad idea. And it makes the LGBT population look bad too. It doesn't help them. So, but let us know what you guys think.
Honey Badger Radio was formed on Reddit, so some good things can happen. But that was way back. That was 10 years ago. Things have changed.
Yeah. It was probably always a bit cancerous, though. Let's be real. All right, so I got some super chats. I'm gonna read them, and then we'll move on to the next story, which is also from Reddit, but I find it a little bit more interesting and fascinating, provided that it's true, which we can't really confirm, but it sounds like it makes sense to me. So Meredith G gives us $5 and says, shekels for the internet bill. Thank you, Meredith. Appreciate it. Anemic Royalty gives us $1.99 and says, read below for my comments, can't fit them here. And then I found his comments and he said, I won't get to watch this part, so in case it doesn't get discussed, I'm a big racing fan. Bobby East, who is like the third story in our list here, was a failure in the minor leagues years ago, but a small-time legend in other leagues. He unfortunately fell down the rabbit hole of drugs and had several prior arrests for it. Tragic story. Well, I'm not going to be talking about his personal failings. This is about him being murdered, and I think that I'm not sure that there is a relationship between his murder and his, personal struggles or his addiction problems.
I can tell you right now.
Might be why he was comfortable going into a more dangerous neighborhood if he was accustomed to them.
No, he was not in a dangerous.
Oh, he wasn't. Okay, well then there's no. I remember reading the story, but I couldn't tell whether the neighborhood was.
I'll let it out of the bag right now. I used to live in this area. It's Westminster, California. It is very safe. I actually know the exact spot where he was stabbed. There's an in and out across from there. I've been there a few times. There's an overpass right there. The overpass goes to the Westminster Mall. It's a very nice area. There's a restaurant called Rodrigo's over there. Excellent Mexican food if you're ever in the place. That's not a very gangster, down-ridden, crime-riddled section of town.
Do we know
when was the last time you were there?
2 months ago.
Okay. Because I was going to say...
Do we know where Trent William Millsap is from?
He was a transient. He kind of hung around kind of the sort of Three Cities area, the Orange County area, Anaheim area, Westminster area. He lived mostly in and out of motels, according to the police report.
See, that's the thing. With California having policy that encourages the transient population to go into areas that normally they're not encouraged by policy to go into, and engage in lifestyle choices in those areas that are normally not common to those areas, that changes things, and it changes the neighborhood. But if it hasn't been changed like that, and you've been there in the last couple months, that's a different story.
We'll come back to that story in a second. I want to go to the next one, but we can get into that in a bit. So I also have a super chat from Gary Thomas, and he gives us $5 and says, as a homosexual, I've always kept a good distance from the alphabet mafia because it always seems full of the hammer and sickle crowd and sex perverts. Well, I do think that there is a big distinction. Like if you're... so thank you for sharing that, Gary. I appreciate it. there's just a big difference between being gay because it's just what you are and you're just like living your life as best you can, and that's just a feature, like being male, like being black or white or whatever, and it doesn't actually like impact anything, then you're doing it right. And if for you an identity is like it's central and essential, you know, and from that you essentially extract that it must be political and that there must be a struggle and that you have to fight, then you're going to be more like an Ezra Miller. And that's what you're dealing with. That's why I always differentiate between the G Mafia and you know, just LGBT people, because there is a big difference, and the G Mafia is a much smaller but far louder group. And I think that regular LGBT folks should be standing up to them. You know,
and Gary, what you described is my experience with it as well.
Yeah. So thank you, Gary Thomas. And then I'm gonna just peek over here at Rumble to see if there's any rants. No, nothing there. And I'm gonna quickly look at because I gotta check for super chows in case people sent them. And if you wanted to send us a super chow, you know, you can go to feedthebadger.com/just the tip, and we will, like, we basically get most of the donation if you use super chow, whereas with super chats Google takes like half of it. All right, so oh man, I don't know which one of these Allison read. All right, Jonathan Doman gives us $5 and says, Allison, you should make more videos like the princess and the plow horse. Thank you for that. I'm sorry I didn't see it. It was on the 15th, so we're a little behind on a lot of these. Swashberry gives us $5 and says, I would like to express how much I enjoy chatting with the callers for these shows. One of the great things about the men's movement is the great variety of perspectives and voices that we get to hear, and I would like to encourage listeners to get involved in the conversation and maybe even call in the future if they are so inclined. Yes, thank you, Swashberry. I love that. Hopefully you see me responding to it. Mouse Utopia gives us $500. What?
Whoa,
Holy shit.
Wow, holy crap.
That's amazing. Hold on a second. I got to play some kind of soundbite for that. Man, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you.
All right, and he says, thank you for years of men's advocacy, insightful discussions, entertaining rants, and authentic personal sacrifice. If the world is at all just, when this war is finally concluded, your names will be honored by history books. I mean, that'd be...
I mean, yeah, thank you, but they won't. If anyone builds a statue of us, they're probably controlled opposition.
Yeah.
Fuck statues. Like, maybe someone will write us in as a footnote in a history book, and that's the best. That's the best we can hope for.
Everybody give props to, by the way, Mouse Utopia for the fat ass donation. Well, okay, go ahead. Yeah,
obviously, but yeah, we're talking about the seeds of the problem. And we've been doing this since 2013, 2014, where the seeds were the worst of the problems. But we're now in an age in 2022 where we're dealing with the creeping ivy of the problem. Like the fuck men protect the women issue has evolved into all sorts of other things, like wars and eugenic programs, and people are looking at that and going, "How do we fix this?" And developed gender-based problems like, "What is a woman?" We really need to focus on what a woman is, because what's important is what a woman is. And you see what I'm getting at there? Which is people are so focused on the giant plants that have grown from these seeds that they can't even look at the seeds of these giant toxic plants.
Yeah.
So it'll be a long time before anyone even recognizes us. And they probably won't. There'll be someone else in maybe 30, 40, 50 years who readdresses these problems. Those people will have statues built about them. We will be forever forgotten. But at least we planted some other seeds.
Yes, we certainly have. And I think that, I don't need the recognition, because I know the ideas are getting out there, and I know that people are picking them up, and they're starting to ask these questions, and they're starting to like look into this stuff, and it's spreading pretty fast. So for me, I mean, that's good enough for me, you know. So
you know how I know we won't be remembered? If you want to see how I know we won't be remembered, look up Ernest Belfort Bax on A Voice for Men and read his writings. Everything that we talk about has been talked about before. 100 years ago, during the suffragette movements, there was a men's rights movement. There were men and women in that movement. And nobody talks about them today either.
Yep.
If anyone builds a statue of me, fucking tear it down and throw it in the sea. And show them my videos, because I'm sure you have them recorded. It's the internet. Everything's recorded forever.
Okay, one more super chat. This is from Amasang, who gives us $5 and says, shout out to Zhurong from Dynasty Warriors, Queen of the Nanman. She's sexy, she's powerful, and she has a loving relationship with her husband, Men Huo. Seriously, their dialogue with each other is sweet. All right, thank you for that, Amasang, for that obscure reference. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next story. And I kind of like this one because I think this is another example of what I was saying when I said that people are coming, they're asking questions they wouldn't have asked before, and they're learning some pretty harsh truths. So let us presume, at least for the purposes of this discussion, that this person is not lying. It's possible that they are, because I couldn't find a source outside of this Reddit post that like really confirms it. But I don't know that someone would simply post this, and it's not even in a men's rights Reddit. It's a Reddit called True Off My Chest. So, you know, but let's take a look anyway and see what this guy discovered. So this post is, I sent 100 applications as a man and a woman. It's much easier being a woman. So I did an experiment. I work in CS and decided to test what the gender bias is. So I took my CV and changed the name to a female name. I'd send it out with my real name, and then a few days later with a female name, or a few days before. Out of 100 applications, my applications with a male name got 7 responses for interview. Out of 100 applications with a female name, I got 45 responses to interview. The female resume was 650% more likely to get a callback, and the resumes were identical. So then I thought, what about someone looking for working class jobs? So I decided to focus on restaurants, servers, hosting, etc., made a fake resume, and responded to Craigslist ads with both male and female names. Sometimes the male went first, sometimes the female went first. Out of 100 applications, my applications with a male name got 10 responses to interview. Out of 100 applications with a female name, I got 87 responses to interview. The female resume got 870% more responses.
All right, we've been hearing this argument for years when it comes to
race,
ethnic names. The idea that if your resume features a first name that, quote unquote, sounds black, you're marginally less likely to get the job. But this, of course, refers to ghetto names like Shaniqua and Habanera Equa and Jalapeno Nicorette or whatever.
Yeah.
But the same goes for white ethnic names associated with rednecks and hillbillies,
Billy
like
Bob.
Cletus and Billy Joe, Billy Jim,
yeah.
Bimmy. That's a Double Dragon 3 reference for all the nerds. And yeah, your name isn't the only criterion that can get you profiled, and not even in the same way. If your resume says qualifications, BA honors degree in drama, then a great deal of employers will assume you're a dickhead. And you can see why, because most of us are indeed dickheads. So yeah, when we're presented with these details, we really need to be privy to the unorphaned statistics around those details. I can definitely believe that a female name will get more callbacks than a male name, because that's how diversity hires work. diversity is code for anyone but straight, white, cis, Christian men. But still, we can't say anything about it if we don't have any receipts. And in this case, we don't, as far as I know. But at least it starts a conversation, right? All the totally moderate YouTubers who claimed that black names don't get as many recalls as white names are going to present this as equally viable evidence as well, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen.
Sorry.
But the thing
when you try to be stringent and non-partisan about these things, you realize there's no real news to talk about. But that's a good thing. Honey Badger Radio, de-newsing the news that isn't news. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So how about this heat, eh?
Oh, yeah. The world is burning. So the thing I was going to add is that this sort of shows a couple things. And I don't think that this is likely to be untrue. I actually believe that there's a pretty good chance that this is accurate, not only because I know other people in the men's movement who have done similar experiments and have had similar life experiences, even like people who aren't involved with this stuff, that are men who find themselves and their jobs being passed over, or their applications passed over in favor of women. I think that there's a lot of like practical reasons why this probably would be true. One of them is that there are initiatives in like office jobs. There are tons of initiatives to try and get women into the industry. They want more women because they're trying to be more equitable, more diverse, and they're trying to get a good score on their, their social credit score for a company, right? Part of that is how many women do you hire? The other thing is, I think that like the people who do hiring, or the people who basically like, decide on who gets hired or whatever, that is often handled by human resources, especially if it's a pretty big company. Human resources is run by feminist women. I mean, like, and they talk to each other. You guys remember that video? And they do. I mean, they share information. They essentially conspire. They put in who they want, and they will pass up men over women in most cases. Yeah, ESG score. Thank you. So there's nothing but incentives for them to give more jobs and better jobs to women. And it doesn't matter, because he did two different, studies. He did a sort of like office job or like a computer programming job, and he did a working class job like servers and even labor probably. And in both cases, he got a far more responses when he applied as a woman. And I think that this is, and the other thing about this is like the I guess you could call it a hidden cost if you're not like overtly aware of this. If men are having a harder time finding a job than women, what is that going to do to the dating market? Like, do you think a woman who works in a professional environment, or even just as, like a clerk or a waitress or whatever, do you think that this is going to affect her prospects, since women are always looking to date up and find men that are like, doing better and have a better job and have essentially like done all of the right things according to a woman's taste in terms of his like life choices and like the things that he's building towards and the status that he is at? That's not going to go well, because if men can't find work and women are always preferred for work, women are not going to find most men like, good enough for them. And that only serves to drive us further apart.
Oh, so, that's been going on for years now. I think I saw 2 or 3 years ago an article that said that women having such a hard time because for those exact same reasons. They're saying, they refuse to settle down. Most women are getting higher paying, at least in regards to men, jobs. And then, even if it's just moderately more successful, why would you marry down?
Exactly. Or even like settle or adjust your expectations. Like say, because like a woman will frequently go get a job at a pretty like big company that pays well, but they're usually thinking if they want a family, they're thinking that they're going to quit at some point. They just have to find the right man, or they're going to reduce their hours or whatever. But that doesn't, that is a factor that doesn't actually get acted upon, because the woman keeps working because she's kind of like, started adjusting to her own lifestyle. And then she just wants to find a man that makes more than her, but there's very few of those men. So now she's competing with a bunch of other women for the same small pool of guys, because guys that aren't making, a lot more than her, even if they're like matching her, I don't know that would be enough, right? So they're
and then on top of that, she's developed attitudes and perceptions that make her unattractive to the men that would make the kind of money that she wants in a partner. And that's something that I've noticed with a lot of women, talking to a lot of women that support like the female dating strategy shit. They all think that they are, because they make money, they're beyond criticism and stuff like that. That men owe them something in a relationship, and they don't owe the man anything as far as treatment, how they treat him and everything, and that ends up causing all kinds of relationship problems. And what they do then is they go back into that subreddit and talk about how they thought they were with a high value man, and he turned out to be a low value man that just made a lot of money because he didn't treat them like they were better and more important than he was, because they worked like a man. And that just blows their mind, their stupid little minds. I want to say really quick, and then I'll shut up about this whole study. This study addressed the one thing that feminist studies that say the opposite never address. This study did the one thing that legitimizes it, that they never do. Usually when you see a study that claims that women are not being treated equally in these workplaces, that women don't get the same consideration, they're not as considered for hiring and promotion, they're not taken as seriously, and so on, they compare applications, men and women's applications, that were not sent to the same workplaces. This guy says he sent applications to the same workplaces. So if he sent to Walmart in the working class end, he sent a man named application and a woman named application to the same Walmart. If he sent to some professional area, he sent a man application and a woman application to the same professional area. That basically legitimizes it, because then you see a difference in how the same work environment, the same employer treats the same application differently, depending on whether it's a man or a woman, versus it's easy to manipulate stuff like this, and feminists do it all the time. They'll send women's applications to one set of employers and men's applications to another set, and maybe the women's set isn't hiring at the time versus the men's set being desperate for employees. And the same thing with this guy. You can't really say that condition exists right now because everybody is desperate, nobody is working, and there are simply not enough employees to go around, and not enough job seekers to go around. So for men to get so many fewer callbacks is extremely telling.
Yeah. And well, I think that you basically said what I was going to say. I wanted to add something. I do think that in addition, there's just a lot of bias factors. So I think that in general, for whatever reason, employers believe, all things being equal, it would just be better to hire a woman. Like, if everything else is equal in terms of like qualifications, they just think it's just better to have a woman. And another thing I was going to add is that sometimes, frequently though, companies will create job positions just to put women in those positions. Like, they'll have them run the social media of the company, for example. And the assumption is that women will do it better than men. And the social media presence online is a big part of a company, especially a corporation. So they'll be making up jobs to put women in. And I think that this ultimately, it does a lot of harm to the potential, or to the, dating and family and stuff, because women will get it in their heads that they're basically too good for most men. And men, I don't know what they're gonna do. Like, I mean, all they can do is basically like take care of themselves and, do the best you can. But that's that's kind of a big big thing to deal with. And again, none of this surprises me.
I should also point out, there is a program in the United States that it reimburses employers a little bit of pay if they hire someone who is receiving food stamps and other forms of welfare payment, but specifically food stamps, TANF. And that actually makes a difference too. And historically, they're more likely to get someone coming in that's on food stamps if they hire a woman with children, like a single mom with children. So they're more likely to hire them. If they think you're a single mom with kids, they'll consider your application more seriously than if they think you're a single father or a single man without kids.
Anyone else have thoughts on that story? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next story. Leave us your comments and let us know what you guys think about this in the comment section. Have you ever encountered things like this at a job that you were trying to get? Maybe you have some, insight that you are willing to share. So, all right, let's talk about Bobby East, because we started talking about it, but now we're really going to get into it. So, Mike?
So, NASCAR superstar Bobby East was stabbed to death while filling up at a gas station in Westminster, California last Wednesday. East, a multi-title winning driver, was stabbed for so far unknown reasons by Trent William Millsap, a transient with a previous criminal record of armed robbery. Police arrived on scene, but East would eventually die of his injuries. Afterwards, a warrant was obtained for Millsap's arrest. A SWAT team was requested to help serve the warrant. In the course of arresting Millsap, he became confrontational with police and was shot. Millsap would later die in the hospital. At the time, Millsap was on parole and had already had a warrant out for his arrest due to a parole violation. The shooting is currently under investigation. And I went ahead and...
Go ahead. I was going to say, so what was Bobby wearing? But I'm joking. Well, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I went ahead and I looked it up. Even from where I currently live, I'm about 20 minutes away from here. About maybe 7 miles. And that is not like a rough part of town or anything. That's, like I said, kind of like on the other side of the Westminster Mall. This is more of like a pick and, well, there used to be a pick and save there, over there. There's a couple filling station. There's an Italian restaurant. There's an In-N-Out right across the street from the filling station where this happened.
Yeah.
And I went ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I've a lot to say, and it might all have been made moot by what you've just said. But we don't know where this fellow was from. The
guy who got stabbed, or the guy who did the stabbing?
The guy who did the stabbing.
The guy that did the stabbing. They have a record on him as a transient who has been in the area. I've got the police report for the press release right here. They described him as frequents Westminster, Garden Grove, and Anaheim areas. And those three areas are kind of all right next to each other and create a bulk of Southern California.
Yeah, Anaheim is quite a sort of built-up area, and
there is a lot of crime here. Like, it's compared to Westminster Anaheim has a lot of crime.
Yeah, California in general is, well, I'll go on with what I was going to say. I don't know much about NASCAR other than it's driving in a small circle over and over. And I don't know much about NASCAR drivers other than that they're all poor and stupid. That's a South Park joke, folks. I don't mean it for real. But perhaps we could try to paint a political profile of the average NASCAR driver. I mean, his name's actually Bobby. One of those names that could get rejected on a resume to the same degree as someone called Greater Demon of Nurgle Equa. And perhaps we could then go on to paint a political profile of the average career criminal, armed robber, and stab-happy ne'er-do-well with that many tattoos across their face. This is why the term degenerate has been recently popularized, because there needs to be a recognizable profile to represent the urban equivalent of a hillbilly. Yeah. Someone who lives in built-up areas but develops a moral compass as similarly sparse as the kind of toothless hick who lives in the mountains and rapes randomers with a banjo. And I'm not talking about hipsters. Hipsters are a phenomenon of the city. There's almost no rural analog for the archetype of a pathetic, defenseless city slicker hipster. And if there ever is, they tend to move out to the big city, and they either become insufferable yuppies or irreproachable homeless people. I'm talking about the kind of thugs you only get in the city, or whose temperament can only be forged in the big city. The worst thing the countryside can do to you is make you interminably bored, but the city will break you. It will break your will to live. It will break your will to let other people live. For God's sake, people, if you live in a major city, there's never been a better time to escape and go live in the sticks, in bumfuck, wherever. The internet is worse out in the sticks, but it's fine. It's worth it for the benefits of the quiet life. They have murderers out here too, but honestly, they're less common than they are in the urban
more likely to kill their own family than you.
Exactly. I don't know anything about Trent William Millsap, so I may end up eating my words when he turns out to be a country boy, but still, everything I've said here is generally true. Get out of Southern California. It's basically one giant city. But don't go to Texas. They don't want you. They've made it quite clear that they don't want you.
The thing that I was going to say, the thing that I wanted to point out about this, and it's kind of why I dropped it into our news chat and everything to begin with, is this. You have to recognize starting out that when they say transient, they're talking about a homeless guy. All right, they're not talking about somebody who just traveled around a lot. They're like all the terms that you can use, throughout history come to mind. The term bum, the term hobo, all of that stuff. Somebody who doesn't have a place to stay. Somebody who doesn't have an address, and more likely than not doesn't have a job. And in California, the policies that have been enacted by the California government are actually really detrimental to the ability of anybody who is transient and doesn't want to be to get out of that lifestyle. And they're also really detrimental to maintaining an area where you're unlikely to run into people who are transient and don't care. And so California has become sort of this, as a state, has become sort of this hellscape of places that you would have expected to not run into crime and people being high in the street. There's video coming out every day from parents whose kids get off the bus at a bus stop in a residential neighborhood, and they're surrounded by people who are tripping on heroin and meth and all kinds of other things, that the kids have to walk past that on their way out. And yes, it is a tragedy, when someone gets caught up in that lifestyle and that downward spiral, like a whirlpool, and either can't or chooses not to try to get out, and then they die. Like, I've had that happen to family. And it is awful to find out that happened to somebody that you love, and realize, gosh, I didn't even know that was going on, and I could have done something to help if I'd have known, right? But at the same time, this is something that the state is exacerbating, and it's been going on for a long time. Used to be in the 70s and the 60s that there were treatment options for people who were suffering from mental health conditions, and that prevented them from being able to live normally in society and caused them to suffer that downward spiral and end up being homeless. Used to be that it was easier to get somebody into rehab if they were in that downward spiral because of hard drugs, and so on. And a lot of that's been eliminated by progressives on the idea that it is a violation of the rights of the individual to try to even encourage them strongly to get involved in those programs and put themselves into a better situation where they might actually be safer and happier and have a sense of pride and productivity and everything. What ends up happening because of that is you have a high crime rate in those areas. Well, what do we know about crime in the men's rights movement? Who are the biggest targets, right? We hear people talking about how safe or unsafe the neighborhood is for women and children. But if you look at crime statistics and you look at who are the victims of violent crime, it's mostly men. So when conditions like this get created, if you look at the homeless statistics, the stats for unsheltered homeless, people who would be called transient, people who don't live indoors ever, that's also mostly men. So the men that our society has decided are trash, are throwing away, pushing off to the side, ignoring their problems, doing absolutely nothing to help them, and creating policies that makes it harder for them to choose to help themselves, right? Those men are dying in the streets, and they are taking men with them who are doing a job, who are living their lives, who have families, who have circles of friends and professional lives that people depend on them. So almost all of the people who are victimized by this meat grinder of a system that has been created by progressive, impractical compassion are men. And they're just ground up and spit out. And we only hear about it on the occasions when some famous guy gets hurt, or some famous guy gets killed, or when it happens to a woman, or when it happens to a child. But the overwhelming majority of men who are victimized by this system, nobody will ever even know their names but the cops that have to close their files. In this case, this incident is the head of a boil that is invisible because it's almost entirely underneath the flesh. And at some point it's going to explode, and people are just going to be shocked as fuck. They're going to have no idea why this happened. Well, this is why. You create a system that chews men up and spits them out and leaves them on the street and does nothing for them when, because they're cold and they're hungry, or they're suffering from schizophrenia, or they're treated as trash by everybody around them, they turn to heroin or meth or anything else that'll take their mind off of how miserable existence is, living outdoors all the time. Like, and people are just going to be shocked as hell that all of a sudden that explodes into a massive crime rate in their neighborhood.
Yep. Well,
some other interesting things I learned in the course of this. I did do some investigating due to that one super chat, and it's really interesting. I guess a lot of Bobby East's fame came over a decade ago. Like, he was a real up and comer I guess in the junior leagues. I don't know what you'd call them because I really don't know damn thing about NASCAR. But I guess when he came of age and was in the actual like pro circuit or whatever, he couldn't hack it. And I think his last race was in 2008. So Lord knows what that man was doing for the last 14 years of his life up until, well, a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So it's really, who can really say what was going on there? What sort of situation he was at? It's also interesting to note on the police report that they list the victim, initially listed the victim as Jane Doe, approximately 38 years old, possibly transient as well. So they had no fucking clue who he was at the time, which just, I guess, goes to show you how fortune fades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is just like Hannah said. If this guy wasn't famous, even in like some niche kind of way, we probably wouldn't have known about this incident.
Maybe it wouldn't have been national. I bet you I would have heard of it because
it would have been
that area are very unheard of.
Yeah, you hear about it when it happens in your neighborhood.
Yeah, you hear about it
on a
in
national
your local
level.
news,
No chance.
Right,
I'm agreeing.
Yeah, I know. So what I was gonna say is that one of the reasons why, aside from everything Hannah said, one of the reasons why I found this story interesting was the timing, because I saw this viral TikTok video that was everywhere, and feminists were commenting on it, and that are on TikTok and on Twitter and stuff, and Chloe Roma made one of her short videos on it, and it involved a woman who was recording a man that she claims, because we don't know, claimed is stalking her or like harassing her in public. She was in a park and the man was hiding behind a tree so that he wouldn't get recorded. So he probably was doing something sketchy or being a creep or whatever, and then she drives him away, so he runs off, and then she starts bawling, and then the video ends, right? And I saw that and I was like, well, it looks like she did the right thing, and that's basically all you can do. But of course, the conversation that erupted from that was a bunch of people saying, like, women, this is why women fear men, and they should fear men, and they should, always be suspicious of men, etc. And even Chloe Roma, who's supposedly an MRA, which I don't want to get into all that, but I think she's phony. But it doesn't matter, because she's claiming to be a men's rights advocate and she has almost 1 million subscribers, which means that she is not someone that should simply be ignored, especially if she's spouting nonsense, which she kind of did, because she basically repeated that same narrative. Women in public, if they fear men, we have to listen to them, we have to listen to their stories, we have to validate them, going on and on and on. And I left a comment on her saying, on her video saying, men are far and away more likely to experience violence in public. And it doesn't matter if it's from men or women. Men are the primary victims of assault and of violence in public, okay? And so when you say, oh, here's the case where, here's an instance where women have it worse, you are literally ignoring the men. And this Bobby story is a perfect example of what I'm saying, because if he wasn't famous, we wouldn't be talking about this. But because a woman, and I'm not justifying anything that happened in that video, but when you start taking an incident and then extrapolating it out and then using it as a narrative so that you can blame men as a group, while also trying to claim that a woman's danger is directly correlated to her feelings and not reality, I think that's a very, I find that very disagreeable, is basically what I'm saying. And that's why I chose it, because I had just seen this video and I had just seen this narrative that because women might feel uncomfortable, it means that they're in more danger. When men are literally in more danger. So,
it's irrational, and part of it is a sensitivity issue. So I'll equate this with a personal experience, but it's not the same exactly. But I had encephalitis in the 6th grade, and that's brain swelling for anybody. It causes pain by compressing the membranes around the brain, because your brain itself doesn't have any pain sensors. But it's an intense level of pain because you have tissue in your head literally being crushed by pressure that's like water pressure, the cerebral spinal fluid pressure. And it was so bad, the pain and the pressure were so bad that, everybody talks about spinal taps like they're kind of torture. I got relief when I had a spinal tap. If I felt better because they removed some of the cerebral spinal fluid to find out if I had meningitis, right? Well, ever since then, I've had this problem. I'm prone to migraines, but I don't feel the pain. So I don't know that I'm developing a migraine until I get to the point where it makes me nauseous or affects my vision, or otherwise it affects me in a way that impacts my performance when I'm doing work or when I'm driving and stuff like that. And then I'll have to take medication because I don't notice that it hurts. Like, once I notice the other symptoms, then I realize, oh, hey, my head hurts, and I just wasn't thinking about it. And it's not like minor pain. It's like somebody pounding on your head with a hammer over and over again. In our society, we have that with regard to men's suffering. It's been so big and so bad and so widespread and so expected for so long that people just don't notice, people don't think about it. Men even take it for granted themselves. When they're experiencing it, it has to get to a level that would be comparable in comparison to ordinary everyday suffering to how a migraine or a cluster headache compares to just, a little mild headache that you would cure with an aspirin. And on the other end of it, if I get an earache, I'm a wimp about it. Massive wimp. Because I've had 2 in my entire life. And it's such a rare experience for me that I notice it immediately and it's horrible and I can't deal with it. Like, women do suffer, but not in the same way that men suffer. They suffer different things, right? And they suffer different ways. So when a woman experiences the kind of violence that men are accustomed to being alert to around them all the time, it's such a rare and unusual and discombobulating thing that if the woman doesn't think through her experience, if she just reacts to how she feels about it and nothing else, it becomes all-encompassing, and it's deer in the headlights moment for them. And I've noticed this with a lot of the women around me. I've been a victim of some pretty profound violence in my life. And I've hung out with violent people and been a victim of their violence or violence against them, been part of the group that was victimized and so on because of that. And as a result, I'm a little more alert and aware to the experience of being a regular victim of violence from both sexes. But I think most women get blindsided by it. They never think about what's going on around them. They never think about what the men around them are experiencing. And so when they have something like that, some idiot or crazy person or predator follows them and acts in a way that is disturbing or threatening or whatever, they write that over the entire male population. They extrapolate from that a level of hysteria that a man isn't going to do because he experiences that all the time. And then at the same time, men are so protective of women, and they work so hard to keep the women in their lives from experiencing their suffering of violent crime and their having to be aware of the threat of violent crime all the time, that when something gets through and affects a woman in their vicinity, they are that disturbed by it. And then they start to think of all the other men around them as being, predators against the women that they care about. And they extrapolate that the innocence and the value of the women that they care about to the entire female population. So you get these hysterical women and these white knights, feminist men that end up promoting this idea that the tiny minority of crime victims who are women are the most important crime victims, and the tiny minority of men who are perpetrators are the most important men. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So let us know what you guys think about this story in the comments. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and we're gonna move on to the next story. Let me just make sure I don't have any
we got one.
chats or what
We
do
got
we
two,
get?
I think. One or two.
I'm looking at the super chats. I don't see anything new. I think I've read all those already.
We got super chows.
Oh yeah, let me go look at those. So give me a second here. We'll look at the super chows, and then super chow channel. Women in Tech gives us $5 and says, speaking of CS job applications, did you get the chance to watch the adult daycare video where a young woman named Natasha Badger is treated to luxuries at her big tech job? I bet an army of majority male programmers are working in the background to fund her luxurious job. I think I know what you're talking about. It's basically like adult daycare.
Yeah, she's doing like the day in her life over at LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I arrive at work and I get a little snack, and then I go sing with all my friends on a group call, and then time for another snack, and then I get to have a mojito at work, and I'm waiting for the actual work to happen, and it never happens, and then she's away from work, and it's like, wow.
Yeah,
God, I want to work there.
I've seen that video. That could be its own show. I think it has to do with like people in the tech world and their desire to change corporate culture to be basically more fun. And I think that, I don't know if they're making that kind of money, but they're certainly spending it. So, okay. So thank you for that, Super Chow. And then Health Potion Addict gives us $50 and doesn't say anything. So I guess I'm just gonna leave that be. Thank you for the donations. And now we're going to move on to the final story. Here's a name I haven't heard in a really long time. Apparently, Ricky Martin is in some trouble. You guys remember Ricky Martin? Maybe you don't.
Oh.
I had to know because I'm Puerto Rican, and it's required that Puerto Ricans know all of the Puerto Rican celebrities so that we could tell people that guy's Puerto Rican. For example, Oscar Isaac, not Puerto Rican. But Jennifer Lopez, unfortunately, yes. All right, go ahead, Mike.
You could not get away from living La Vida Loca in was either grade school or junior high. I forget which for me.
Yeah.
And like, oh my goodness, all the girls loved him, and I really, really enjoyed ruining their fantasy by telling them he was gay.
Yeah.
And I remember I got in trouble for this once, and I'm like, I'm telling them the truth. Why are you booing me?
We knew he was gay when he was in Menudo, but
I've seen what makes you cheer.
So Latin pop legend Ricky Martin faces domestic violence allegations after receiving a restraining order in Puerto Rico earlier in July. Under Puerto Rican law, the identity of the victim has been kept anonymous, but two different stories have emerged, or at least that's how the article I read paints it. Speaking with a Spanish tabloid, Ricky's brother, Eric Martin, alleges the victim was Ricky's 21-year-old nephew, Dennis Yadil Sanchez. Another newspaper alleges that Martin had the restraining order filed against him after a partner broke up with him after dating for half a year. A breakup that Martin allegedly did not take well. Martin's attorney categorically denies these allegations, stating, quote, Ricky Martin has, of course, never been and would never be involved in any kind of sexual or romantic relationship with his nephew. The idea is not only untrue, it is disgusting. We all hope that this man gets the help he so urgently needs, but most of all, we look forward to this awful case being dismissed as soon as a judge gets to look at the facts. And if I can add an addendum onto the story, both of these take on a whole new layer, especially the one claiming that this was like a fling for half a year that resulted in a breakup. Last I checked, Ricky Martin was happily living his life as a gay married man with like multiple children for at least the past 5 years.
This all sounds very Kevin Spacey, though. I've been living my life as a gay man.
Well, no, he hasn't been using that as a defense. He came out loud and proud, I think, in like 2000.
Yeah.
Way back ages ago. And
yeah, it's no secret. I mean, for most of his success, you know, living La Vida Loca and stuff, and I think he had like some other song about football. You know, he didn't really talk about his private life, so everyone women apparently just assumed that he was straight, but he didn't deceive anybody, to my knowledge. So
it's just women make assumptions about attractive men.
Yeah, I mean, like some attractive performers, they intentionally leave out being gay because it could like make more money for them. Like George Michael didn't tell people that he was gay until like the 90s, but like all through the 80s, even though, you know, there was like, it should be obvious, but all through the 80s, you know, in his music videos and everything, I think it was the sex appeal of George Michael was being used so that women will buy.
And Ricky Martin was very similar to that too.
Yes, exactly. That's why I made the comparison. So, you know, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because, I mean, you know, you're a performer. You're not going to meet these people anyway. They're not being tricked, you know. So, I mean,
having said all that, it's quite the clash of the sort of threat narrative. Titans. I in the rainbow corner, wearing the rainbow trunks, is the heavyweight champion of the world. Men are abusive perverts. In the other rainbow corner, wearing the other rainbow trunks, is the challenger. LGBTQ people are not abusive perverts. Let's just make this a clean fight. No punching above the belt. Seconds out. Let's get ready to rumble. If this was a visual medium, I'd just do the meme of the superhero mopping his flop sweat as he looks at the two buttons. But here we are. We translate memes into a radio format, folks. It's only Badger Radio after all. But yeah, once again, the controversy itself is the news story here. We don't know what really happened. And we do indeed have a dilemma here. Men get falsely accused of horrendous shit all the time, see Johnny Depp, and LGBTQ people get away with horrendous shit all the time, see Ezra Miller. Alas, we don't have enough information to figure out what kind of story this really is, and we won't until it goes to trial. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I want to hear that information. Domestic abuse is light drama, all things considered. It is perfect Judge Judy fodder. But incestuous domestic abuse, I'm not going to tune into that. Either it's insidiously true or it's an insidious lie. Either way, I'd rather leave it up to the judge and the jury on this one. No, thank you. That's the sort of thing that kills my buzz.
This is also deadly serious for him as I believe sexual abuse within the family is treated much more harshly in Puerto Rican courts. And I believe that the leading headline said something like, if convicted, he could spend 50 years, which quite frankly would be the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah, and it is a very serious allegation. And so I guess my main thing would be to caution against running with any narratives that will inevitably emerge from this. in any direction, because I mean the primary thing that I think is the only way we can determine what's right is due process, and that has to be the primary, I guess you could say the drum that you have to beat. And that's why I chose this story, because well, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
But I also saw a lot of people going along with it, like, well, it seems like this guy's a perv. And I'm like, based on what? We don't know yet, right? So let's wait and see.
So there are two things that I think we can take from this right away. And, the first one, like, you can tell based on the fact that there are just two different stories coming out from it. And one of them appears to be like false out of hand because they only responded to the other one, and they wouldn't have responded. They would have responded to both of them if one of them was in any way believable, right? But it isn't something that should be taken lightly. Either the allegation is false, and the person who made the allegation made an incredibly false allegation, an incredibly heavy false allegation in a legal environment. And if that's the case, there should be recourse, right? Or we're looking at a situation that obviously we're all disgusted by if it were true, and it demonstrates the importance of not accepting the grooming narrative that the LGBTQ mafia in the United States is promoting. Because if there is a victim in this case, and if there is, where we're looking at a young man who was abused in a way that is likely to make him eight times more at risk of suicide, we can't start taking that lightly just because the G Mafia in the United States doesn't want to admit that it happens sometimes. So either, somebody has done a profoundly horrible wrong to Ricky Martin, or he has done a profoundly horrible wrong to somebody else. And they are both things that progressives are, through their political activism, asking us to take far more lightly now than throughout history. And we should tell them no on both counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we'll find out how they feel about it as this story continues to unfold. I mean, he is a gay man, which is pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to the G Mafia, but he is a man of color.
Yep.
So we'll see. I don't know like where he's going to fit in, but this is the way they do things. So I guess we'll find out. All right. So that's the last story. We're going to move on now to the patron show and look at this article, killing, and that's okay. We'll see what this woman's argument is, Sophie Lewis, on this whole thing. So, and if you guys want to join us, you have to become a badger yourself. Go to feedthebadger.com and set up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where you'll be able to access all the additional content like the patron shows. The other thing I guess I wanted to say is thanks everyone for coming on. Thanks to Mike J for doing the write-ups, and for Hannah and Mike J for coming on the show with me. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about any and or all of the stories that we discussed today, and most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News. Hopefully we'll see you in the patron show. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Men's rights activists